The little girl's frozen fingers gripped his boot like she was holding on to life itself. "Please, mister," she whispered through cracked blue lips. "Just be our daddy today. Just today. Before they come, take us away." Eli Mercer hadn't spoken to a child in 3 years. Not since he'd buried his own daughter in Texas soil. He should have kept riding. God help him, he should have kept riding. Welcome to our channel. If this story touches your heart, please subscribe. Stay until the very end and comment which city you're watching from. Let me know how far this story has traveled. The child's grip tightened on his boot. Eli looked down at fingers so small they couldn't even wrap around the worn leather properly. Blue-white at the knuckles, trembling, but refusing to let go. "Please," she said again. "Please, mister." Behind her, another girl stood clutching a fence post. Same brown eyes, same hollow cheeks, same desperate hope that had no business existing in a world this cruel. Twins, maybe 6 years old, maybe 7. Hard to tell when hunger had stolen the softness from their faces. Eli's horse shifted beneath him, snorting clouds of steam into the frozen air. The blizzard had been building for hours, and every instinct he'd developed over 3 years of running told him to keep moving. Find shelter in town. Leave these ghosts behind like all the others. But the smaller one, the quiet one, she was staring at him with eyes that saw too much. "Lily," she whispered to her sister. "Lily, let the man go." "No." The first girl, Lily, shook her head fiercely. "God sent him Rosie. You said so yourself. You said someone was coming." Eli's jaw tightened. "Listen here," he said, his voice rough from days without use. "I ain't nobody's answer to prayer. You girls need to get inside 'fore you freeze to death." "Can't," Lily said simply. "What do you mean, can't?" "Mama said wait by the fence. Said don't come in till she calls." The girl's chin quivered, but she held it high. "She's been real sick. Sometimes she forgets to call." Eli closed his eyes. "Don't do this," he told himself. "Don't you dare do this." "How long you been standing out here?" Rosie held up both hands, fingers spread wide. Then she folded down 2 fingers. 8. 8 hours in a Wyoming blizzard, on Christmas morning. Christ almighty! Eli swung down from his horse before he could stop himself. His boots hit the snow, and pain shot up through legs that had been frozen in the saddle too long. He barely felt it. "Where's your pa?" Lily's face crumpled, just for a second. Then that terrible strength came back. "Daddy went to heaven," she said, 18 months ago. "But we don't need him anymore 'cause God's sending us a new one. Rosie saw it in her dream." Rosie tugged at her sister's sleeve. "Lily, don't." She did. She dreamed about a man on a brown horse coming through the snow, and he had sad eyes like Daddy used to have when he thought about the war, and he was gonna save us. Eli's horse was brown, and he knew exactly what kind of eyes he had. "I ain't here to save nobody." He said the words coming out harder than he intended. "I'm just passing through." "That's what the angel said too," Lily replied matter-of-factly. "In the Christmas story. The angel was just passing through, but then he stayed 'cause Mary needed help." "I ain't no angel." "I know. Angels don't got guns." She pointed at the colt on his hip. "But cowboys do. And Daddy said cowboys are just angels with dirty boots." Something cracked in Eli's chest. He knelt down in the snow, bringing himself to their level. Up close, he could see the patches on their coats. Neat, careful work, the kind that spoke of a mother's love and empty pockets. "What's your mama sick with?" "The shaking sickness," Lily said. "She gets real hot, then real cold, then she sleeps for a long time. Doc Morrison said—" She trailed off. "Said what?" "Said she needs medicine. But medicine costs money. And Mr. Burnett at the bank took all our money after Daddy died." Eli's hands curled into fists at his sides. "Took it how?" Said Daddy owed him. Said the farm owed him too. Said if Mama can't pay by New Year, we gotta leave. Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. He said maybe the orphan train would take us. Said sisters sometimes get to stay together if they're lucky. Eli had seen the orphan trains, watched them pull into stations across 3 territories, children lined up like livestock, waiting for strangers to pick them like produce. Sometimes sisters got separated. Most times they did. Please, mister. Rosie spoke for the first time, her voice barely louder than the wind. We'll be real good. We won't ask for nothing. Just be our daddy today. So Mama can see we got someone. So she don't gotta worry about us when she couldn't finish. Eli understood what she was trying not to say. So she don't gotta worry about us when she dies. He stood up so fast his head spun. Take me to your mama. Now. The cabin was small but well built. Eli recognized the hand of a craftsman in the doorframe. The window casings, the way the roof pitched just right to shed snow. Whoever their daddy had been, he'd known his trade. Inside was warm. Someone had banked the fire proper, probably Lily, judging by the soot stains on her sleeves. The smell of sickness hung in the air. Fever, sweat, and something worse. Something Eli remembered from field hospitals during the war. The smell of a body fighting a battle it was losing. Mama. Lily crept toward the bed in the corner. Mama, we found him. We found our Christmas daddy. The woman on the bed stirred. Eli made himself look at her. Clara Whitfield was dying. He could see it in the gray tone of her skin, the way her breathing rattled in her chest, the fever-bright eyes that struggled to focus on his face. But even now, even like this, there was something fierce in her expression. Something that refused to surrender. Who? Her voice cracked. Her voice. Who are you? Name's Eli Mercer, ma'am. I was passing through when I found your girls outside. Clara's eyes snapped to her daughters with sudden terrible clarity. Outside in this storm, Lily, I told you to stay on the porch. We did, Mama, for a while. But then Rosie had her feeling, and we went to the fence to wait, and... You waited at the fence. For how long? Lily studied her boots. How long? Since the sun came up, Rosie whispered. But it's okay, Mama. He came, just like I dreamed. Clara fell back against her pillow, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes. Her hand reached out, trembling, searching for something to hold. Lily grabbed it. I'm sorry, Clara breathed. I'm so sorry, babies. Mama's trying. Mama's trying so hard. We know, Mama. I can't keep. Her eyes found Eli again, and something shifted in her face. Recognition. Not of him specifically, but of what he was. A stranger. A danger. A man in her home, while she lay helpless. Get out. The words were weak, but the intent behind them was iron. Ma'am? I said get out. I don't know you. I don't want your help. My girls aren't charity cases, and I won't have some drifter thinking he can... She broke off into coughing. Deep, wet, rattling coughs that shook her whole frame and left blood flecks on the handkerchief she pressed to her lips. Eli didn't move. Mama, please, Lily begged. He can help. He's got sad eyes like Daddy. Rosie said, Rosie's 6 years old. She doesn't know. More coughing. She doesn't know what men like him really want. Eli felt the accusation like a knife between his ribs. She was right to be afraid. Right to protect her children. In her position, he'd have done the same. But he couldn't leave. God help him, he couldn't leave. Mrs. Whitfield. He kept his voice low, calm, the way he used to talk to witnesses too scared to testify. I'm going to tell you something, and then you can decide whether I stay or go. Clara watched him with fever-bright suspicion. 3 years ago, I had a wife named Sarah, and a daughter named Hope. She was 6 years old. Exactly like your Rosie. His throat closed. He forced the words through anyway. A gang of outlaws hit our farm while I was away. I was a circuit judge back then, traveling to some god-forsaken town to deliver justice to people who didn't deserve it. Clara's expression flickered. When I came home, I found them. Both of them. I buried them in the garden, where my wife used to grow her roses. Eli's hands were shaking. He shoved them in his coat pockets. I burned that farm to the ground, burned my judge's robes with it, and I've been riding ever since, running from everything. The cabin was silent, except for the crackle of the fire and Clara's labored breathing. Your girls found me on the road, and they asked me to be their daddy, just for today. Eli swallowed hard. I can't be nobody's daddy, Mrs. Whitfield. I proved that when I let my own daughter die alone while I was off playing God for strangers. Rosie made a small sound. But I can chop your wood. I can fix whatever's broken around this place. I can make sure your girls eat something besides snow for their Christmas dinner. He met Clara's eyes directly. And I can stand between them and whatever's coming. Because something is coming, isn't it? Something named Burnett. Clara's breath caught. How do you know that name? Lily told me. Said he took your money. Said he's taking your farm. Lily talks too much. Maybe. But she also waited 8 hours in a blizzard because she believed God would send someone. Eli paused. I don't believe in much anymore, ma'am. But I believe that little girl believes. And I reckon that's got to count for something. Clara stared at him for a long moment. Then she closed her eyes. The medicine, she whispered. Doc Morrison has medicine that could help, but it costs $12. I've got 3. Where's the doctor? In town, 2 miles east. Eli pulled a leather pouch from his saddlebag. Coins clinked inside. I've got $14 in change, more'n enough for medicine and whatever else you need. Clara's eyes flew open. I can't take your money. You ain't taking it. I'm giving it. Same thing. No, ma'am, it ain't. He set the pouch on the table by her bed. Taking is what Burnett does. Giving is what decent folks do, and I'm trying real hard to remember how to be decent again. Clara's hand reached for the pouch. Stopped. Why? She breathed. Why would you do this for strangers? Eli looked at Lily and Rosie huddled together by the fireplace, watching him with those huge brown eyes full of hope and fear, and a desperate need to believe that the world wasn't as cruel as they'd learned it to be. Because my little girl used to look at strangers the same way, he said quietly, and I spent the last 3 years praying someone would have helped her if she needed it. Praying the world had at least one decent person left. He turned toward the door. Maybe I'm just trying to be that person. Even if it's too late. Wait. Eli stopped. Clara's voice was stronger now. Something had shifted in her some wall coming down just enough to let a sliver of light through. If you're going to town, you should know what you're walking into. What do you mean? Silas Burnett doesn't just run the bank. He owns half the town. Sheriff's in his pocket. The dock, the general store, even the new church they're building, all his money. Clara's jaw tightened. And he killed my husband. Eli turned back to face her. You know this for certain. My husband was a builder, best in the territory. Burnett hired him to construct the new church. But Thomas... Clara's voice broke on the name. Thomas found something wrong. The materials were rotten. Cheap timber passed off as quality stock. The whole building was going to collapse probably in spring when the congregation was biggest. Thomas said he had proof. He was going to report it to the territorial inspector. And then he had an accident. Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face now. Fell from a scaffold, 20 feet onto solid rock. They said he wasn't careful. They said he'd been drinking. Her hands clenched the blanket until her knuckles went white. Thomas never drank, not once in 10 years of marriage. And he was the most careful man I ever knew. He had daughters. He would never risk leaving them. Eli's mind was already working. Evidence, motive, method. The instincts he'd tried to bury were clawing their way back to the surface. You said he had proof. Where is it? Clara hesitated. You can trust him, Mama, Lily said suddenly. I know you can. Lily. Rosie saw it. In her dream, the man with sad eyes was gonna find Daddy's hiding place. He was gonna make the bad men pay. Eli looked at Rosie. The quiet girl met his gaze with an intensity that raised the hair on the back of his neck. Those eyes, so old in such a young face. The loose stone, Rosie whispered. Behind the fireplace. Daddy said never tell nobody. But you're not nobody, mister. You're the one who's supposed to find it. Clara made a sound like a wounded animal. Rosie, baby, you can't know that. Dreams aren't real. They're just... Thomas came to me, Rosie said quietly. Last night, in my dream. He said a man was coming. He said to show him the stone. The fire crackled. Snow whispered against the windows. And Eli Mercer, who had stopped believing in anything the day he buried his daughter, felt something stir in his chest that he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Terrible, dangerous hope. Show me, he said. Hard. The stone came loose with a grinding sound that seemed too loud in the quiet cabin. Behind it was a hollow space carved with the precision of a man who knew his tools. Inside was a leather satchel. Eli pulled it out and opened it carefully. Documents spilled across the table. Receipts, invoices, drawings, and at the bottom, a leather-bound notebook filled with neat handwriting and careful sketches. Thomas's journal, Clara whispered, struggling to sit up. He showed me once, said it was his insurance policy, said as long as we had it, Burnett couldn't touch us. Eli flipped through the pages. What he found made his blood run cold. This isn't just proof of bad materials, he said slowly. Your husband documented a pattern, years of fraud, building contracts all over the territory. And look here. He pointed to a list of names. Burnett wasn't working alone. He had partners. In the territorial government, in the banks, even in the courts. Clara's face went pale. My God. Thomas wasn't killed because of one church project. Eli closed the journal carefully. He was killed because he found evidence of a criminal conspiracy that reaches all the way to the Capitol. Then we're dead, Clara breathed. If Burnett knows that journal exists, does he? He's been looking for something, ever since Thomas died. He's come to the house 3 times asking about Thomas's papers, offering to buy them, then threatening. Clara's hand found Eli's arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Last week he gave me an ultimatum. Sell him the farm by New Year's Day, or he'll have my daughters declared wards of the territory. He's got a tame judge in Cheyenne. It's already been arranged. 4 days. They had 4 days before Silas Burnett destroyed what was left of this family. Mama? Lily's small voice cut through the tension. Is the bad man going to take us away? Clara couldn't answer. The tears were coming too fast. So Eli did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He made a promise. No, he said, his voice steady as stone. No, he ain't. How do you know? Eli looked at Rosie, at Lily, at Clara, struggling to hold herself together through fever and grief and a fear no mother should ever have to feel. And he made his choice. Because I'm not going anywhere, he said. Not today, not tomorrow, not until this is finished. But you said, I know what I said. Eli picked up Thomas's journal and held it against his chest. I said I couldn't be nobody's daddy. And maybe that's still true. But I can be something else. What? Lily asked. Eli's jaw set into a line that would have been familiar to anyone who'd faced him in a courtroom. I can be the man who makes sure Silas Burnett never hurts this family again. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside that small cabin, something had shifted. Something had begun. And in 3 days' time, the entire territory would learn what happened when a broken man found something worth fighting for. The children didn't know it yet, neither did Clara, but Eli Mercer had just declared war. Clara fell asleep shortly after exhaustion and fever finally pulling her under. Eli sat by the fire, Thomas's journal in his hands, while the twins curled up on a mattress in the corner. Lily fell asleep almost immediately, her breath evening out into the rhythm of childhood unconsciousness. But Rosie lay awake, watching him. "Mister," she whispered. "Yeah, your little girl, the one who died. What was her name?" Eli's throat tightened. "Hope." Rosie was quiet for a moment. "That's pretty." Yeah, it was." "Do you still love her?" The question hit him like a physical blow. So simple, so devastating. "Every day," he managed. "Every single day." Rosie nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she already knew. "Daddy says love don't stop just 'cause someone's gone," she said. "He says it just changes shape, gets bigger maybe, big enough to hold new people." Eli stared at her. "Your daddy told you this?" "In my dream, last night." Rosie's eyes were ancient in her small face. "He said you were coming. He said you lost your hope. He said maybe you could borrow ours for a while." Borrow ours. Borrow hope. Eli looked at this strange, quiet child who dreamed of dead men and saw too clearly into hearts that had nothing left to hide. "Go to sleep, little one," he said softly. "Okay." She closed her eyes obediently. Then just before sleep took her, "Mr. Wu, yeah. I'm glad you stopped running." The fire popped, the wind howled, and Eli Mercer sat in the darkness of that small cabin, holding a dead man's journal, and wondering if maybe, just maybe, he hadn't been running away from something all these years. Maybe he'd been running toward this. Morning came gray and bitter. Eli hadn't slept. He'd spent the night reading Thomas Whitfield's journal by firelight, page after page of meticulous documentation that painted a picture of corruption so vast it made his stomach turn. Building contracts with falsified materials. Inspection reports signed by officials who'd never visited the sites. Money flowing through shell companies and disappearing into accounts that led straight to the territorial capital. Thomas Whitfield hadn't just been a builder. He'd been a witness to an empire of theft and lies, and he'd died for it. The fire had burned low when Eli heard Clara stirring. He closed the journal and turned to find her watching him, her fever-bright eyes clearer than they'd been the night before. "You stayed," she said. "I did." Most men would have taken the journal and run, sold it to Burnett for enough money to disappear. Eli met her gaze steadily. "I ain't most men." Clara studied him for a long moment. Whatever she saw made something shift in her expression. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of something that might become trust if he earned it. "The girls?" "Still sleeping." Eli nodded toward the corner where Lily and Rosie lay tangled together like puppies seeking warmth. "They had a hard day yesterday." "They've had a hard year." The words hung between them, heavy with everything they implied. "Mrs. Whitfield." "Clara." She pushed herself upright, wincing at the effort. "If you're going to war for my family, you might as well use my Christian name." "Clara, then." Eli leaned forward, the journal balanced on his knee. "I need to know everything. Not just what's in these pages, but what happened after Thomas died. Who came to you? What they said. What they threatened." Clara's jaw tightened. "Why?" "Because I used to be a circuit judge. I know how men like Burnett operate. They don't just kill their enemies, they destroy them. Make them look guilty of something so nobody asks questions." He paused. "What did Burnett say your husband was guilty of?" Clara's hands twisted in the blanket. "Drinking," she said quietly. "They said Thomas was drunk when he fell. Said they'd found whiskey bottles in his work shed." "But Thomas didn't drink." "Never touched the stuff. His father was a drunk. Beat his mother half to death before he ran off. Thomas swore he'd never be like that." Clara's voice cracked. "He kept that promise for 32 years, and they made him into a liar with a single planted bottle." Eli nodded slowly. What else? They said he'd been stealing from the church fund, skimming materials, selling them on the side. Clara's eyes flashed with sudden, fierce anger. My husband who couldn't tell a lie to save his life, who gave away more than we could afford because he couldn't stand seeing people go without. They turned him into a thief. Did anyone believe it? Some did, the ones who wanted to. Clara looked away. It's easier to believe a dead man was corrupt than to face the truth about the living ones running your town. Eli understood. He'd seen it before. The way communities closed ranks against uncomfortable truths, choosing comfortable lies over justice that might cost them something. And the ones who didn't believe it? They're scared. Clara's voice dropped. Agnes Miller at the general store, she was my friend. Still is, I think. But she can barely look at me when I come to town. Her husband owes money to Burnett's bank. One wrong word and they lose everything. The preacher, Reverend Brooks. Clara hesitated. He's new, came about 3 years ago. I think he suspects something's wrong, but the church is being built with Burnett's money. Hard to bite the hand that's raising your steeple. And the sheriff, Wade Colton. Something complicated moved across Clara's face. He was my brother-in-law, married to my sister Ruth before she died in childbirth 5 years back. He's still family, I suppose, but family doesn't mean much when Burnett's got your livelihood in his pocket. Clara's voice turned bitter. Wade came to see me after Thomas died, stood right there in that doorway and told me he was sorry. Then he told me there wouldn't be an investigation. Eli felt his jaw tighten. He said that directly. He said the evidence was clear. Said pursuing it further would only hurt me and the girls. Said I should take whatever Burnett offered and start fresh somewhere else. Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. Start fresh. With 2 children, no money, and a reputation as the widow of a thief and a drunk. Where exactly was I supposed to start fresh? You didn't leave. No, I didn't leave. Clara's chin lifted. This is my home. Thomas built it with his own hands. Every board, every nail, every stone in that fireplace. My girls took their first steps on these floors. I'll die before I let Silas Burnett take it from us. The words echoed in the small cabin, fierce and final. Eli looked at this woman, sick, exhausted, barely able to sit up, and saw something that reminded him painfully of Sarah. That same stubborn strength. That same refusal to bend. It had gotten Sarah killed. He wouldn't let it kill Clara. I'm going to town, he said, standing, to get your medicine and to do some looking around. Burnett will know you're here by now. His men watch the roads. Good. Eli checked the rounds in his Colt, the motion smooth and automatic. Let him wonder. He'll come for you. I'm counting on it. Clara's eyes widened. You want him to come. I want him to make a mistake. Eli slid the gun back into its holster. Men like Burnett, they're used to operating in the shadows. Used to having everything go their way. When something unexpected happens, they get nervous. And nervous men make errors. And what happens when he doesn't make an error? What happens when he just sends someone to kill you like he killed Thomas? Eli paused at the door. Then at least your girls will know someone tried. He glanced back at her. That's more than my daughter got. He was out the door before Clara could respond. The cold hit him like a fist. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world buried in white. His breath crystallized in the air, and the snow creaked beneath his boots as he walked toward the barn where he'd left his horse the night before. The mare whickered when she saw him, tossing her head in greeting. Easy girl. Eli ran his hand along her neck, feeling the warmth beneath the rough winter coat. We've got work to do. He was saddling her when he heard the footsteps. Small, quick, trying to be quiet and failing. I know you're there, he said without turning around. Silence. Then, how'd you know? Eli turned to find Lily standing in the barn doorway, wrapped in a coat 2 sizes too big, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. I used to track outlaws for a living. A little girl ain't exactly a challenge. Lily's face fell. I was trying to be sneaky. Why? 'Cause Mama said I wasn't supposed to bother you. Eli felt something twist in his chest. You ain't bothering me. Lily brightened immediately. She crept closer, her eyes fixed on the horse. What's her name? Haven't given her one. Why not? Never saw the point. She's just transportation. Lily looked at him like he'd said something deeply sad. Everything deserves a name, she said seriously. Names mean you matter. That's what Daddy used to say. Eli's hands stilled on the saddle straps. Your daddy said a lot of things. He was real smart. Lily moved closer, reaching out to touch the horse's nose with careful reverence. He could build anything. Houses, barns, furniture. Once he made Rosie a dollhouse that had real little windows that opened. It was the prettiest thing I ever saw. What happened to it? Lily's face shadowed. Mr. Burnett's men came after Daddy died. Said they were looking for papers. They broke a lot of stuff. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They broke the dollhouse. Eli's hands clenched on the leather straps. Did they find what they were looking for? No. A tiny smile crossed Lily's face. Rosie showed him the wrong hiding spot. Daddy had 3. She showed him the one with just old letters in it. They took everything, but it wasn't the important stuff. Smart kid. Both of them were smart kids. Lily, I need you to do something for me. What? While I'm in town, I need you to look after your mama and your sister. Can you do that? Lily's chest puffed with importance. I always look after them. I know you do, but today especially. Don't let anyone in the house except me. If strangers come, you hide with Rosie in that back corner by the flour barrel. You understand? Lily's eyes went wide. You think the bad men are coming? I think we should be ready in case they do. Lily nodded slowly, her small face setting into lines of determination that looked wrong on someone so young. Okay, she said. I'll protect them. Good girl. Eli swung up into the saddle and looked down at her. One more thing. What? Her name is Hope. Lily blinked. The horse? Yeah. Eli's throat felt tight. After someone I used to know. Lily's face broke into a radiant smile. That's a good name, she said. Real good. Eli turned Hope toward the road and didn't look back. If he had, Lily might have seen the tears freezing on his cheeks. The town of Stillwater Creek emerged from the winter landscape like a wound in the snow. Maybe 300 souls, Eli estimated. Enough for a main street, a church steeple rising against the gray sky, and the usual collection of businesses that kept frontier communities breathing. The general store, the saloon, the bank. He noted the bank's position instinctively. 2 stories brick construction, the kind of building that announced its owner had more money than sense or taste. The name Burnett and Associates gleamed in gold letters above the door, subtle as a rattlesnake. Eli tied Hope to the hitching post outside the general store and went inside. The warmth hit him first, then the smell of coffee and tobacco, and 100 different goods crammed into a space too small to hold them properly. A woman behind the counter looked up at his entrance, her expression shifting from welcome to wariness in the span of a heartbeat. Help you. Looking for Doc Morrison's place. 2 doors down. The woman, Agnes Miller, if Clara's description was accurate, studied him with sharp eyes. You new in town. Just passing through. She didn't believe him. Lot of people pass through Stillwater Creek. Not many stop in the middle of a blizzard. Not many have a choice when the storm hits. Suppose not. Agnes glanced toward the window, and Eli followed her gaze to see 2 men standing outside the bank watching the general store with undisguised interest. You might want to make your business quick, mister. Passing through is healthier when you don't linger. Eli touched the brim of his hat. Appreciate the advice, ma'am. Don't appreciate it. Follow it. He left without responding, but he filed away the interaction. Agnes Miller was scared, but she wasn't broken. That might prove useful. Doc Morrison's office was exactly where Agnes said it would be, a narrow building, squeezed between the barber shop and a lawyer's office that looked like it hadn't seen a client in months. Eli pushed open the door and found himself in a cramped waiting room that smelled of carbolic acid and camphor. "Doctor," he called out. A curtain at the back parted and a man emerged, short, balding, with the permanently exhausted expression of someone who'd seen too much suffering and couldn't afford to stop seeing more. "I'm Morrison. What do you need?" "Medicine, for Clara Whitfield." The doctor's face changed. "You're the one." "The one what?" "The one staying at the Whitfield place. Word travels fast in small towns, mister. Especially when the word involves a widow and a stranger." Eli ignored the implication. "She's got fever, bad cough, blood in her handkerchief." Morrison's expression sobered. "How long since it started?" "Week or more, according to her girls." "And you're just now coming for medicine?" "I just got here last night." The doctor grunted and disappeared behind the curtain. Eli heard drawers opening, bottles clinking. Morrison emerged with a brown paper package that he set on the counter. "Quinine for the fever, laudanum for the pain, and this," he held up a smaller bottle, "is for the cough. 3 drops in warm water twice a day. More than that will kill her." "How much?" $12. Eli counted out the coins and pushed them across the counter. Morrison made them disappear with practiced efficiency. "That'll keep her comfortable," the doctor said quietly. "But I won't lie to you, mister. Whatever she's got, it's taken hold deep. Without proper rest, proper food, proper care. She'll have all of that." Morrison studied him. "You sound like a man making promises he might not be able to keep." "Then I reckon I better keep them." The doctor held his gaze for a long moment. Then something shifted in his face. Not quite trust, but something close to it. "The Whitfield woman," Morrison said slowly. "She's a good woman. Didn't deserve what happened to her husband. Didn't deserve what's happening to her now." "No, she didn't." "Silas Burnett has his eye on that property. Has for years. That land sits right on top of what surveyors say is the richest silver deposit in the territory." Eli went very still. Silver. Not everyone knows it. Thomas Whitfield found traces in his creek last spring, made the mistake of filing a report with the Territorial Assayer's office. Morrison's voice dropped. 3 weeks later, he was dead. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't just about silencing a witness. This was about land, mineral rights, the kind of wealth that made men into monsters and monsters into pillars of the community. Who else knows? About the Silver Burnett, his partners, the territorial governor probably. Morrison paused. "And now you. Why are you telling me this?" "Because someone needs to do something, and the rest of us are too afraid to try." Morrison's eyes were old and tired and full of a shame that had been festering for years. "I watched them carry Thomas Whitfield's body out of that building site. I saw the wounds. I know a fall doesn't leave marks like that. You could testify. I could also end up like Thomas." Morrison shook his head. "I've got a wife, grandchildren in California. I'm not brave, mister. I'm just tired of pretending I don't see what's right in front of my face." Eli gathered the medicine and tucked it inside his coat. "What you just told me, you understand I'm going to use it." "I understand. And Burnett will know someone talked." Morrison smiled grimly. "I've got a gun too, mister. And I've been a coward long enough. Maybe it's time to see what being brave feels like before I die." Eli nodded once, then turned toward the door. "Mister," he paused. "What's your name? In case anyone asks later who started this particular fire." "Mercer, Eli Mercer." "Well, Mr. Mercer, God be with you. You're going to need him." Eli stepped out into the cold. and found Silas Burnett waiting for him. The man was exactly what Eli had expected. Well-fed and expensively dressed, with the kind of smooth confidence that came from years of getting everything he wanted without consequences. Two men flanked him, hired muscle by the look of them, their hands resting casually near their holsters. "Mr. Mercer," Burnett said, and his voice was warm and welcoming as a snake's embrace. "I don't believe we've had the pleasure." "Can't say the pleasure's mine." Burnett's smile didn't waver. "Now that's hardly the way to greet a pillar of the community. I'm Silas Burnett. I understand you're staying at the Whitfield place." "Word travels fast." "In a small town it does. I like to keep abreast of new developments, especially ones involving properties that interest me." Burnett's eyes were cold despite his warm manner. "The Whitfield farm is such a property. Mrs. Whitfield and I have been negotiating." "That what you call it, negotiating?" Something flickered in Burnett's expression. "I call it helping a widow in need. She's alone sick with 2 small children. That farm is too much for her. I've offered her a fair price." "You've offered her robbery." The words hung in the frozen air. Burnett's smile finally died. "I'd be careful, Mr. Mercer. Throwing accusations around a town where you don't know anyone and no one knows you." "I know enough." "Do you?" Burnett stepped closer. "You know that Clara Whitfield's husband was a drunk and a thief, that he died because he was careless and corrupt, that the widow's been barely scraping by, unable to pay her debts, unable to care for her children properly." "I know that every word you just said is a lie." Burnett's eyes went flat. "I'd be very careful about making enemies here, Mr. Mercer. Very careful indeed." Eli stepped forward until he was close enough to see the pulse jumping in Burnett's throat. "I've been careful for 3 years," he said quietly. "Careful got my family killed. Careful kept me running while men like you destroyed innocent lives. I'm done being careful." Burnett's men shifted hands, moving toward their weapons. Eli didn't flinch. "Call off your dogs," he said, "unless you want them to learn what a Texas Ranger does to men who threaten him." The word Ranger rippled through the group like a stone dropped in still water. Burnett's face tightened. "Your law." "Was. Now I'm just a man who doesn't like bullies." Eli held Burnett's gaze. "You've got 4 days before New Year's. That's 4 days for me to find enough evidence to hang you. I suggest you spend them getting your affairs in order." He walked past Burnett without waiting for a response, mounted Hope, and rode out of town. His back prickled the whole way, waiting for a bullet that didn't come. But he knew it would. Eventually. Men like Silas Burnett didn't let challenges stand. Eli had just painted a target on his own back. Now he had to make sure it stayed there and away from Clara and her girls. The real war was about to begin. Clara was sitting up when Eli returned. The medicine had already started working its small miracle. Color had crept back into her cheeks, and her breathing came easier, without that terrible rattling that had kept him awake through the night. She watched him stomp snow from his boots, her eyes sharp and searching. "You're alive," she said. Disappointed. Surprised. Clara accepted the medicine he handed her, turning the bottles over in her hands. "Word came while you were gone. Agnes Miller sent her boy with a message." "What message?" "Burnett knows who you are. A Texas Ranger who went mad after his family died. He's telling everyone you're dangerous, unstable." Clara paused. "He says you burned down your own home with your wife and daughter inside." Eli felt the words like a knife between his ribs. "That's a lie." "I know it is." Clara's voice was steady. "A man who burned his family wouldn't cry in his sleep the way you did last night." Eli stiffened. "You heard that. I hear everything in this house. Walls are thin." She set the medicine bottles on the table beside her bed. "You called out for someone named Hope. You begged her to run." The cabin felt suddenly airless. "I don't want to talk about that." "Then we won't." Clara pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "But you should know what you're fighting. Burnett doesn't just destroy people. He destroys their names, their memories, everything they were. He did that to Thomas. He's doing it to me now, and he'll do it to you if you stay." Eli moved to the fire and added another log more to give his hands something to do than because the flames needed tending. "Where are the girls?" "Barn. Lily decided your horse needed company." Clara almost smiled. "She's named her Hope, apparently. Says you said it was after someone important." "It was. Your daughter." Eli didn't answer. Clara let the silence stretch for a moment, then shifted direction with the practiced ease of a woman who understood when to push and when to retreat. "What did you learn in town?" "Burnett's not just after your farm because Thomas knew about his crooked building contracts." Eli turned to face her. "He's after what's under it." Clara's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "Silver. Thomas found traces in your creek. Filed a report with the territorial assayer." Eli paused. 3 weeks before he died. The color that had returned to Clara's face drained away. "Thomas never told me about silver." "Probably trying to protect you. If you didn't know, you couldn't be threatened for the information." Eli pulled Thomas's journal from his coat. "But he wrote about it in here, page 43. He knew exactly what your land was worth. And he knew Burnett would kill for it." Clara's hands trembled as she took the journal and found the page. Her eyes moved across her husband's careful handwriting, and tears began to slide down her cheeks. "He was going to surprise us," she whispered. "That's what he said the week before he died. He said he had a surprise that would change everything. I thought he meant something he was building." "He was building something. A future. Burnett took it from him." Clara pressed the journal against her chest, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Eli wanted to comfort her, wanted to say something that would ease the fresh wound of learning exactly how calculated her husband's murder had been. But he'd never been good with words. Sarah used to tease him about it, said he could face down armed criminals without flinching but couldn't string together a decent compliment to save his life. So he did what he knew how to do. "I sent a telegram from town," he said, "to a U.S. Marshal I used to know in Helena, man named Dawkins. If he's still alive and still wearing the badge, he'll come." Clara looked up, hope and fear warring in her expression. "How long?" 3 days, maybe 4. New Year's Eve is in 3 days. "I know." "Burnett's deadline." "I know, Clara." Eli's voice came out harder than he intended. "I know the timing. I know what's at stake. I know we're racing against something that might be unwinnable. But I don't know how to do nothing. I tried that for 3 years and it nearly killed me." Clara stared at him for a long moment. "You really think we can beat him?" "I think we have to try." The cabin door burst open. Lily came running in, her face flushed with cold and something else. Fear. "Mama! Mama, there's men coming!" Eli was at the window before Lily finished speaking. 3 riders approaching from the east, moving fast despite the snow. He couldn't see their faces yet, but he recognized the body language. Men with purpose. Men with violence on their minds. "Clara, take the girls to the back. Behind the flour barrel like I told Lily." "Eli. Now." Clara didn't argue. She pulled herself from the bed with strength she probably didn't know she still had, grabbed Rosie from where she'd been drawing by the fire, and shepherded both girls toward the back of the cabin. Eli checked his Colt. 6 rounds. His rifle was by the door. Another 8 rounds there. 14 shots against 3 men. Better odds than he deserved. He opened the door and stepped onto the porch just as the riders pulled up at the fence line. The man in front was big, broad-shouldered, with a face that had been broken and badly reset at least once. The 2 behind him were younger, leaner, with the hungry look of men who'd learned that violence paid better than honest work. "That's far enough," Eli called out. The big man grinned, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "You Mercer. Who's asking?" "Name's Cobb. I work for Mr. Burnett." Cobb leaned forward in his saddle. "Mr. Burnett says you need to leave. Says the lady inside has business to conclude and you're interfering with negotiations." "Negotiations are over. Mr. Burnett disagrees. Cobb's grin widened. He also says if you don't leave peaceful-like, we're authorized to make you leave. Eli's hand rested on his holster, casual but ready. 3 of you. 1 of me. You like those odds? Like them fine. Then you don't know what I used to do for a living. Something flickered in Cobb's expression. The story Burnett had spread was clearly incomplete. Mr. Burnett says you're crazy, says you burned your own family. Mr. Burnett's a liar, but you probably knew that already working for him. Cobb's jaw tightened. I don't get paid to think. I get paid to solve problems. Right now, you're a problem. Then come solve me. The words hung in the frozen air. The 2 younger men exchanged nervous glances. They hadn't expected resistance. Hadn't expected a lone man to face down 3 armed riders without flinching. Cobb wasn't nervous, but he was reassessing. You know what happens if you start shooting out here, Cobb said slowly. Sheriff Colton comes to investigate, finds a dead drifter on a widow's property. Maybe he finds other things too, things that don't look good for the lady or her girls. Or maybe he finds 3 dead men who tried to force their way onto property where they weren't wanted. You'd hang for that. Might be worth it. Cobb studied him for a long moment. You really are crazy. I'm a father who lost his daughter. That's worse than crazy. That's got nothing left to lose. Eli drew his pistol in one smooth motion, the barrel leveling at Cobb's chest before any of the 3 could react. Now you've got a choice. You can turn around and tell Burnett his intimidation didn't work. Or you can die right here in this snow and let your families wonder what happened to you. Nobody moved. The wind whistled through the silence. Then slowly Cobb raised his hands. Easy there, Ranger. Nobody needs to die today. Then ride. Cobb turned his horse, gesturing for his men to follow. This ain't over, he called back. Mr. Burnett always gets what he wants. Always. Not this time. The 3 riders disappeared down the road, their hoofbeats fading into the winter quiet. Eli didn't holster his weapon until they were completely out of sight. You can come out now, he said. The cabin door creaked open, and Clara appeared. Her face pale, but her eyes burning with something that might have been admiration. You just faced down 3 armed men. They weren't expecting a fight. Bullies never do. They'll come back. I know. Clara stepped onto the porch, pulling her shawl tight against the cold. With more men, with guns blazing. They'll burn this place down with us inside if they have to. Probably. And you're still staying. Eli finally holstered his pistol. I told you before, I'm done running. Clara was quiet for a moment. My husband said something like that once. The night before he died. Her voice cracked. He said some things were worth dying for. I told him nothing was worth leaving our daughters without a father. What did he say? He said some things were worth dying for because they were about more than just him. They were about what kind of world our daughters would grow up in. Clara wiped her eyes. I hated him for that. For being willing to die for principle when I needed him to live for us. Eli understood. God help him, he understood completely. Clara, I don't hate you, she continued, for doing what he did, for being willing to fight when running would be safer. She pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting for control. I can't watch another good man die for my family. I can't. Then don't watch. Clara looked at him. What? I'm not asking you to watch. I'm not asking you to do anything except keep those girls safe and let me handle what's coming. Eli met her eyes steadily. I know what I'm risking. I know the odds. But Clara, I've spent 3 years wishing I'd been home when those outlaws came. Wishing I'd died instead of Sarah and Hope. Wishing I'd had the chance to fight for them. His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. You're giving me that chance. A chance to be there when it matters. A chance to fight for something instead of running from everything. Even if I die doing it, that's more than I've had in 3 years. Clara's tears were falling freely now. That's a terrible reason to stay. Maybe, but it's the only one I've got. The cabin door opened again, and Rosie appeared, her small face solemn and pale. Mama, the bad men are coming back. Eli spun toward the road. Nothing. Empty snow and gray sky. Rosie, there's nobody. Not now. The little girl's eyes were distant, unfocused. Tonight, when the moon rises, a lot of them. Clara's hand found Eli's arm, her grip tight with fear. She does this sometimes, sees things before they happen. Thomas thought she was gifted. I thought she was just imaginative. But she's never been wrong. Eli looked at the child, at those ancient eyes and that young face. How many men, Rosie? 7. Her voice was flat, emotionless. 7 men with fire. What else do you see? Rosie's gaze drifted past him toward something invisible. Snow, red snow, and screaming. Her lower lip trembled. So much screaming. Then she blinked, and the spell broke. She was just a little girl again, frightened and cold, reaching for her mother. Clara gathered her up, pressing kisses to her hair. It's okay, baby. It's okay. We're going to be fine. But her eyes met Eli's over her daughter's head, and he saw the terror there. 7 men. Tonight. The telegram to Marshal Dawkins wouldn't reach Helena until tomorrow at the earliest. Even if Dawkins dropped everything and rode hard, he couldn't arrive before New Year's Eve. They were on their own. I need to fortify this cabin, Eli said quietly. Can your girls shoot? Clara's face went rigid. They're children. They're targets. Tonight when those men come, they'll be targets. I'm not saying give them guns. I'm saying, can they run? Can they hide? Can they survive if things go bad? Clara was silent for a long moment. Lily can shoot. Thomas taught her last summer. She's not good, but she knows which end is which. Clara's voice shook. Rosie won't touch guns. She says they make her head hurt. Then Rosie hides. Lily stays with you. I'll face them outside. Alone. It's the only way. Eli started calculating angles, cover positions, fields of fire. Inside this cabin we're trapped. Outside I can move. Pick them off before they can organize. 7 men, Eli. You said it yourself. You've got 14 shots. Then I better not miss. Clara set Rosie down and stepped toward him, her face fierce with desperation. This is suicide. You know that, don't you? You're planning to die so we can live. I'm planning to fight. The dying part is just a possibility. Eli? He caught her hands in his, surprising them both. Clara, listen to me. 3 years ago I wasn't there when my family needed me. I've been carrying that guilt every day since. Every mile I rode, every drink I drank, every time I thought about eating my own gun, it was all because I couldn't be there. His grip tightened. Tonight I get to be there. Whatever happens, I get to stand between evil and innocent children and say, not today. Maybe I'll live, maybe I won't. But I will not run. Do you understand? I cannot run. Not again. Clara's tears dripped onto their joined hands. Then we fight together. Clara. No. Her voice hardened with the same steel he'd heard when she talked about her land and her husband's memory. You don't get to make noble sacrifices while I cower inside with my children. Thomas did that. He went alone, kept me safe and ignorant, and he died alone. I won't let that happen again. You're sick. I'm better. The medicine helped. Clara squeezed his hands. And I'm a better shot than Lily. Thomas taught me before he taught her. If 7 men are coming to burn my home and take my children, I will stand on that porch with a rifle and shoot until I can't shoot anymore. That's not negotiable. Eli stared at her. This woman. This impossible, stubborn, beautiful woman who refused to bend even when bending would save her life. Fine, he said finally. We fight together. Clara nodded once. What do we do first? Eli released her hands and moved toward the door. First we prepare. Move anything flammable away from the walls. Fill every bucket with water. Board up the windows we can't cover with gunfire. And then... He paused at the threshold. Then we wait for moonrise. The afternoon passed in grim preparation. Eli showed Clara how to position herself by the window for maximum cover and minimum exposure. He reinforced the door with the cabin's only table, wedging it against the frame at an angle that would force anyone trying to enter to push through a barrier while exposing themselves to fire. Lily helped without being asked, her small hands carrying buckets and blankets with fierce determination. Rosie sat by the fire drawing in her journal with crayons that had worn down to nubs, her pictures dark and disturbing. Flames consuming buildings, figures running through snow, and over a tall man standing alone against a tide of shadows. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" Clara asked during one of their brief rest periods. Rosie showed her the latest picture. Clara went pale. It was Eli. Unmistakably, Eli rendered in the simple strokes of a child's hand. He stood in front of the cabin guns in both hands, facing a semicircle of dark figures. And behind him, barely visible through the doorway, were three figures watching: Clara, Lily, and Rosie herself. "Is this what you see coming?" Clara whispered. Rosie nodded slowly. "Does he—" Clara couldn't finish the question. Rosie looked up at her mother with ancient, sorrowful eyes. "Some things I can't see, Mama. Some things aren't decided yet." The moon rose at 7 o'clock. Eli watched it from the porch, his breath crystallizing in the bitter air. The cold was savage, the kind that could kill a man in hours if he didn't keep moving. But he couldn't afford to move. Every step he took was one more sound that might give away his position. Clara was inside with the girls, all three of them positioned by the back window, where they could escape into the woods if things went badly. Eli had made Clara promise to run if he fell. She'd promised. He didn't believe her. The first rider appeared at 8 o'clock, then a second, then a third. By the time they'd all assembled at the fence line, Eli counted exactly 7 men, just as Rosie had predicted. They carried torches that flickered orange against the blue-white snow, and he could see rifles slung across their backs. They weren't here to negotiate. Cobb was among them. He sat his horse at the center of the line, grinning that tobacco-stained grin. "Mercer," he called out, "you still in there?" Eli didn't answer. "Mr. Burnett's given you one last chance. Ride out now and nobody has to get hurt. Stay and we burn that cabin to the ground with everyone inside." Silence. "Suit yourself." The riders began to spread out, flanking the cabin on both sides. Standard intimidation formation. Surround the target, cut off escape routes, then close in. Eli had seen it before. He'd also seen it fail. He raised his rifle, sighted on the torchbearer farthest to the left, and fired. The shot cracked through the frozen air like thunder. The man screamed, dropping his torch as he clutched his shoulder. The torch hissed as it hit the snow, extinguishing instantly. 6 torches left. Chaos erupted. The riders scattered their formation, breaking as they sought cover that didn't exist in the flat, open ground around the cabin. Eli fired again, catching a second man in the thigh. The horse reared, throwing its rider into a snowbank. 5 torches. Return fire began, bullets thudding into the cabin walls and whistling past Eli's head. He dropped behind the porch railing, reloading with hands that had forgotten how to tremble. "Inside!" he shouted. "Stay down!" Glass shattered somewhere behind him. Clara screamed. Then the crack of a rifle from inside the cabin, and another scream from outside. Eli risked a glance. Clara had taken position at the shattered window. Thomas's old rifle pressed against her shoulder. Smoke curled from the barrel, and on the ground beyond the fence, a third man lay still. 4 torches. "Clara, get back. Shut up and shoot!" He almost laughed. Almost. The remaining riders had regrouped behind the barn. Eli could see their torches flickering through the gaps in the wooden walls. They were planning something. Organizing. Then he smelled smoke. Not torch smoke. Building smoke. The barn! Clara's voice was ragged with fear. They're burning the barn. Eli's jaw tightened. Hope was in that barn. He was moving before he made the conscious decision, vaulting over the porch railing and sprinting through the snow toward the growing flames. Bullets sang past him. One tugged at his coat sleeve. Another grazed his ear, leaving a line of fire across his skin. He didn't slow down. The barn door was already engulfed. He hit it with his shoulder, feeling the heat sear through his coat as the weakened wood gave way. Smoke billowed around him, thick and choking. "Hope, easy, girl!" The horse screamed somewhere in the darkness. Eli followed the sound, his eyes streaming, his lungs burning. He found her in the back stall, rearing and plunging against the ropes that held her. He cut the ropes with his knife and grabbed her halter. "Come on! Come on!" They burst through the side door, just as the roof collapsed behind them. Outside, gunfire still crackled. Clara was still shooting from the cabin. The remaining riders were circling, looking for angles of attack. Eli slapped Hope's flank, sending her galloping toward the safety of the tree line. Then he turned and raised his rifle. 3 torches left. He fired. 2 torches. Fired again. 1 torch. The last rider, Cobb, charged toward the cabin with his torch held high and murder in his eyes. He was screaming something, words lost in the chaos of flame and gunshots. Eli's rifle clicked empty. He drew his pistol. Cobb was 10 yards away. Eli fired. The torch flew from Cobb's hand as the bullet took him in the chest. He slid from his saddle and hit the snow without a sound. Silence fell. Eli stood in the churning snow, his pistol still raised, his chest heaving. The barn was fully engulfed now, flames leaping toward the black sky. 7 bodies littered the ground around the cabin, some still, some groaning. The cabin door burst open. Clara ran toward him, the rifle still clutched in her hands, her face wild with terror and relief. "Eli, Eli, are you?" He caught her as she reached him, pulling her against his chest. "I'm okay. I'm okay." "The barn you went into the fire, I thought, had to save the horse." His voice was rough with smoke and exhaustion. "Couldn't let them take everything from you." Clara pulled back to look at his face. "You stupid, brave, impossible man." "I know." "You could have died." "I know." She kissed him. It happened before either of them could think about it. Her lips against his, cold and chapped and desperate. His arms tightening around her, pulling her closer, as if he could protect her from everything that had happened and everything that was still coming. When they finally broke apart, both of them were shaking. "That was—" Eli started. "Necessary," Clara finished. "I've wanted to do that since you faced down those men this morning." "Clara, don't." She pressed her fingers to his lips. "Don't tell me it's complicated. Don't tell me we barely know each other. I know. But I also know that you just walked through fire for my family, and I know that tomorrow might not come. So if you're going to tell me not to feel what I'm feeling, save your breath." Eli looked at her. This woman who'd buried her husband and raised her daughters alone and stood at a broken window shooting at armed men while her home burned around her. "I wasn't going to tell you that," he said quietly. "What were you going to tell me? That I don't deserve this. Don't deserve you or those girls or any of it. That I failed my own family, and I might fail yours too." Clara's hands cupped his face. "Then we'll fail together. But tonight we won. Tonight we're alive, and that's enough." Behind them, Lily and Rosie emerged from the cabin, their faces pale in the firelight. "Mama?" Lily's voice was small. "Is it over?" Clara turned, holding out her arms. "For tonight, baby. For tonight, it's over." The girls ran to their mother, wrapping themselves around her like small anchors seeking harbor. And Eli Mercer stood in the snow, surrounded by the bodies of his enemies, watching the family he'd sworn to protect, hold each other in the light of their burning barn. Not over, he thought, not even close. But for now, for this moment, they were alive, and that would have to be enough. They buried the dead before dawn, not out of respect, out of necessity. 7 bodies frozen in the snow would bring questions from anyone passing by, and questions were dangerous until Marshal Dawkins arrived. Eli dug the graves alone, while Clara tended to the girls inside. His shoulders burned with each shovel stroke, his lungs still raw from the smoke he'd breathed the night before. But the work felt right, honest. The kind of labor that emptied the mind and exhausted the body until there was nothing left but muscle and breath. He was patting down the last mound of frozen earth when Clara appeared with coffee. "You should rest." "Can't." Eli accepted the cup, wrapping his fingers around the warmth. "Burnett will know by now. His men didn't come back. That means he's either running or planning something worse." "You think he'll run?" "Men like Burnett don't run. They've got too much to lose." Eli drained the coffee in 3 swallows. "He'll try something else. Something legal. Something that makes us look like the criminals." Clara's face tightened. "The sheriff." "That's my guess. Burnett will spin a story about his men coming to negotiate peacefully and getting ambushed by a crazy drifter." Eli handed back the empty cup. "By noon, there'll be a posse forming. By nightfall, they'll be here with a warrant." "For what?" "Murder, 7 counts." He paused. "Maybe more if Burnett decides to get creative." Clara's hand went to her throat. "They can't. You were defending us. They attacked first." "That's our word against a dead man's, and dead men don't talk." Eli started toward the cabin. "We need to move. Get the girls somewhere safe before Colton shows up. Where everyone in town is afraid of Burnett. Nobody will take us in." Eli stopped. She was right. The network of fear Burnett had built over years meant there was nowhere within 50 miles that would shelter a family marked for destruction. Churches turned away sinners. Neighbors locked their doors. Even blood relatives suddenly remembered urgent business elsewhere. He'd seen it before. The isolation was part of the strategy. "Agnes Miller," he said slowly. Clara blinked. "What?" "The woman at the general store. She warned me about Burnett. Tried to help without being obvious about it." Eli turned to face Clara. "She's scared, but she's not broken. There's a difference. Agnes has a family. A husband who owes money to Burnett's bank. She can't. She can choose. Everyone can choose." Eli's voice hardened. "I'm not asking her to fight. I'm asking her to hide 2 little girls for a few hours while we figure out our next move. That's all." Clara was quiet for a long moment. "And if she says no, then we find someone else. But we have to try." Eli reached out and took her hand. "Clara, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Her fingers tightened around his. "I trusted you the moment you came back through that door last night instead of riding away." "That might have been the stupidest thing I've ever done." "Maybe," Clara almost smiled. "But it was also the bravest, and I've had enough of smart men who play it safe. Thomas played it safe for years. Look where it got him." Eli pulled her closer. "This isn't over. Burnett still has the law on his side. He still has money connections power. All we've got is a dead man's journal and a prayer that the marshal arrives in time. Then we better pray hard." The sound of hoofbeats shattered the moment. Eli's hand went to his gun as he spun toward the road. Single rider coming fast from the direction of town. He positioned himself between Clara and the approaching figure, his body coiled for violence. But as the rider drew closer, he saw the badge glinting on the man's chest. Sheriff Wade Colton. Alone. "Get inside," Eli murmured. "No." Clara stepped up beside him. "This is my property, my fight. I'm not hiding." The sheriff reined in at the fence line, his breath steaming in the cold morning air. He was younger than Eli had expected, maybe 35, with the weathered face of a man who'd spent his life outdoors. His eyes were tired, haunted, the eyes of a man who'd made too many compromises. "Mrs. Whitfield." Colton's voice was careful, neutral. "Mr. Mercer." "Sheriff," Clara replied. "You're out early." "Had reports of gunfire last night. Thought I should investigate." "Investigate what?" "There's nothing to see here." Colton's gaze drifted to the fresh graves behind the cabin. "Nothing to see," he repeated flatly. 7 men rode out to your property last night, Mrs. Whitfield. 7 men employed by Silas Burnett. None of them came back. Maybe they got lost. In snow this deep, with torches and horses. Colton shook his head slowly. "Whatever happened here, I need to know about it. Officially." Eli stepped forward. "You want to know what happened, I'll tell you. 7 armed men attacked this homestead in the middle of the night. They tried to burn us out. We defended ourselves. You killed 7 men. They tried to kill 2 children and their sick mother. What would you have done?" Colton's jaw tightened. "That's not the question, Mr. Mercer. The question is whether you had legal right to be on this property in the first place, whether Mrs. Whitfield invited you here or whether you forced your way in, whether this was self-defense or vigilante justice. You know damn well what it was. What I know doesn't matter." Colton's voice dropped. "What I can prove matters. What witnesses say matters. And right now the only witnesses are you, Mrs. Whitfield, and 2 little girls, against the word of Silas Burnett." Clara pushed past Eli. Wade, look at me." The sheriff's expression flickered. "Mrs. Whitfield." "Clara, I was your sister's best friend. I held her hand when she died. I've known you for 10 years. Clara's voice shook with controlled fury. "You know what Burnett is. You know what he did to Thomas. You know what he's been doing to this whole town. Are you really going to stand there and pretend you don't?" Colton's face went pale. "What I know and what I can prove." "Stop saying that." Clara's composure cracked. "Stop hiding behind procedure and protocol and legal technicalities. A good man is dead because of Silas Burnett. My husband is dead, and you did nothing. You looked at his body and you did nothing. I couldn't prove. You didn't try." Tears were streaming down Clara's face now. "You were scared, just like everyone else, scared of what Burnett might do to you if you asked the wrong questions. So you let him win. You let him murder my husband and destroy our name and terrorize our family, and you did nothing." Colton sat rigid in his saddle, his face a mask of pain. "Ruth would have been ashamed of you," Clara whispered. "My sister loved you because she thought you were a good man. She would have been ashamed." The sheriff closed his eyes. For a long moment nobody spoke. Then Colton dismounted. "There's a posse forming in town," he said quietly. "Burnett's got them worked up. Says a dangerous criminal is holding the Whitfield family hostage. Says they need to ride out here and rescue the women and children." Eli's hand tightened on his gun. "How many?" 12, maybe 15. Good men mostly. Farmers and shopkeepers who believe what they're told." Colton looked at Eli directly. "They'll be here by noon. And you came to warn us." "I came to do my job." The sheriff's voice was tired. "My actual job. The one I swore an oath to do before Burnett started paying my salary." Clara stared at him. "Wade?" "I've been a coward, Clara. You're right about that. I've been scared and compromised and everything Ruth would have hated." Colton's jaw set. "But I'm done. Whatever happens today, I'm done being Burnett's puppet." "What changed?" Colton reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a leather satchel. "This." He handed it to Eli. Inside were documents, dozens of them. Financial records, property deeds, correspondence with territorial officials, and at the bottom, a letter bearing the seal of the territorial governor. "I've been collecting evidence for 2 years, Colton said. "Ever since Thomas died. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't prove it alone. So I started keeping records. making copies of documents that crossed my desk, building a case piece by piece. Eli flipped through the pages, his eyes widening. This is everything. Bank transactions showing money flowing to the governor's office. Deeds signed over under duress. Witness statements that were buried. He looked up. Why didn't you come forward? Because I was scared. Colton's voice was raw. Because Burnett owns the territorial court. Because the last man who tried to expose him ended up dead in a mining accident. He paused. Because I'm not brave like Thomas was. I'm just a small-town sheriff who wanted to keep his head down and survive. Clara moved toward him slowly. But you kept collecting. I had to do something, even if I was too afraid to use it. Colton met her eyes. Ruth would have wanted me to try. Even if I failed. She would have wanted me to try. Clara reached out and touched his arm. She would have been proud of you for this. Maybe. Colton's voice cracked. But it doesn't undo what I let happen. What I let Burnett do to your family. No, it doesn't. Clara's grip tightened. But it's a start. Eli closed the satchel. This evidence combined with Thomas's journal is enough to bring down Burnett and everyone connected to him. We just need to get it to federal authorities. Marshal Dawkins, Colton said. I know him. He's honest. One of the few territorial marshals who can't be bought. I sent him a telegram yesterday. He should be on his way. Then we hold out until he gets here. Colton glanced toward the road. But that posse will arrive first, and they won't wait for explanations. Eli's mind was racing. 12 to 15 armed men. Believing they were rescuing hostages from a dangerous criminal. They'd shoot first and ask questions never, unless someone changed the narrative. The church, he said suddenly. Clara and Colton both looked at him. What about the church? Burnett built it, paid for it. His name is on the cornerstone. Eli's eyes gleamed with sudden intensity. But Thomas's journal proves the materials are rotten. The whole building could collapse at any moment. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we stop playing defense. Eli handed the satchel back to Colton. You said the posse is made up of good men, farmers and shopkeepers, people who go to that church every Sunday, people whose wives and children sit in those pews. Clara's breath caught. You want to warn them. I want to show them the truth, in a way they can't ignore. Eli turned to Colton. Can you get us into town without being seen? There's a back road through Miller's property. Comes out behind the general store. Agnes Miller. Clara's voice was thoughtful. She might help, if she understood what was at stake. More than her family's debt. Colton shook his head. I don't know. Her children go to that church, Clara interrupted. Her grandchildren will go to that church. If Burnett's building collapses during a Sunday service. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I'll talk to Agnes, Eli said. Colton, you keep the posse busy. Delay them. Tell them you need to scout ahead, verify the situation, whatever it takes. And if they don't listen, then we're no worse off than we are now. Colton hesitated. This is insane. You're talking about walking into a town that wants you dead and convincing them their most respected citizen is a murderer and a fraud. I'm talking about telling the truth. Eli met his eyes. The truth that you've been collecting for 2 years. The truth that Thomas died for. The truth that everyone in that town already suspects, but is too afraid to face. And if they don't believe you, then I'll die trying. Eli's voice was quiet, but certain. But at least I'll die fighting. At least I'll die for something that matters. Colton stared at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. Ruth always said I needed to find my backbone. He mounted his horse. I guess today's the day. He rode off toward town, and Eli turned to Clara. I need you to stay here with the girls. No. Clara. I said no. Her jaw was set. Thomas tried to protect me by keeping me ignorant. You're not making the same mistake. If we're exposing Burnett's crimes, I'm going to be there. I'm going to look him in the eye and make him see the widow he tried to destroy. The girls will stay with Agnes, if she agrees to help. Clara took his hand. We're in this together, Eli. From the moment you walked through that door, we've been in this together. Don't shut me out now. Eli looked at her. This woman who'd lost everything and refused to break, who'd stood at a window firing at armed men while her home burned, who'd kissed him in the snow surrounded by the bodies of their enemies. He'd known her for 3 days. It felt like a lifetime. Together, he agreed. Clara squeezed his hand. Now let's go tell a town the truth about the monster they've been worshipping. The back road to town was treacherous with fresh snow, but Miller's property provided cover all the way to the rear of the general store. Eli left Hope tied in a copse of trees and approached the back door with Clara at his side. Agnes Miller answered on the third knock. Her face went white when she saw them. Are you insane? Burnett's got half the town looking for you. We know. Eli held up Thomas's journal. We also know what he's done, what he's planning, and what will happen to this town if nobody stops him. Agnes's eyes darted to the journal, then to Clara's face. Clara, honey, I'm sorry about what happened to Thomas. I truly am. But I can't get involved. My husband... Your husband goes to church every Sunday, Clara interrupted. So do your children. So do your grandchildren. Agnes's expression flickered. What does that have to do with anything? Thomas was building that church when he died. He discovered that Burnett was using rotten materials, cutting corners, pocketing the difference. Clara's voice was steady. The building is going to collapse, Agnes. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But eventually. And when it does, everyone inside will die. The color drained from Agnes's face. That's not possible. The church looks fine. Solid. It looks solid because that's what Burnett paid for. The appearance of quality. Eli opened the journal to the relevant pages. Thomas documented everything. Measurements, material specifications, structural weaknesses. This building is a death trap waiting to happen. Agnes's hands trembled as she took the journal. My granddaughter was baptized in that church last spring, she whispered. And she'll be buried by it if we don't stop Burnett. Agnes read the pages in silence, her face growing paler with each line. This is real, she said finally. This is all real. Thomas died to protect this information. Burnett killed him to hide it. Clara touched Agnes's arm. We're not asking you to fight. We're asking you to help us spread the truth. Tell the people who trust you what's really going on. Give them a chance to make an informed choice. Burnett will destroy me. My family. Burnett is going to destroy everyone eventually. The only question is whether we stop him now or let him do it piece by piece. Eli's voice was gentle but firm. You said you were tired of pretending you didn't see what was in front of your face. This is your chance to stop pretending. Agnes closed the journal. For a long moment she stood motionless, her internal struggle visible in every line of her face. Then she straightened her spine. The Women's Auxiliary meets at the church at 10 o'clock, every Sunday morning. 30 women who trust me. 30 women with husbands and children and grandchildren who sit in those pews every week. Can you convince them? I can show them the truth. Agnes's voice hardened. What they do with it is up to them. But they deserve to know. They all deserve to know. Clara pulled her into a fierce embrace. Thank you, Agnes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We haven't won anything. Agnes pulled back, her eyes wet, but determined. Now get out of here before someone sees you. I've got work to do. They slipped back through the snow toward the trees where Hope waited. Clara was breathing hard, her face flushed with exertion and emotion. Do you think it'll work? I think we gave the truth a fighting chance." Eli helped her onto Hope's back and swung up behind her. "That's all we can do. And if it's not enough?" Eli wrapped his arms around her, holding the reins with one hand. "Then we face whatever comes next. Together." Clara leaned back against his chest. "Together," she repeated. They rode toward the church where the battle for truth was about to begin. The building rose against the gray sky like a monument to ambition and deception. Its white steeple reached toward heaven, but its foundations were built on lies and murder and the broken dreams of everyone Silas Burnett had destroyed to build his empire. Today those foundations would crack. Today the truth would finally be told. And whatever happened next, Eli Mercer was done running. He'd found something worth standing for, something worth fighting for, something worth dying for, and he wasn't going to let it go without a fight. The church doors stood open. Eli could hear voices inside rising and falling with the cadence of argument. Agnes had done her work. The women's auxiliary had become a tribunal, and the evidence spread across the altar was damning beyond any reasonable doubt. He dismounted and helped Clara down, his hand lingering on hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Ready?" "No." Clara's voice was steady despite the fear in her eyes. "But that's never stopped me before." They walked through the doors together. The scene inside stopped them both cold. 30 women packed the pews, their faces ranging from shock to fury to tearful understanding. Agnes stood at the front, Thomas's journal open in her hands, reading passages aloud in a voice that trembled but never broke. And scattered throughout the crowd were men, husbands who'd come looking for their wives and stayed when they heard what was being revealed. But it was the figure at the back of the church that drew Eli's attention. Silas Burnett. The man stood alone, his expensive coat rumpled, his face twisted with a rage that bordered on madness. He'd come to stop the meeting, Eli realized, to silence the truth before it could spread. He'd arrived too late. "Lies." Burnett's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. "Every word of it. That journal is a forgery created by a bitter widow and her criminal accomplice to destroy an honest businessman." Clara stepped forward. "My husband was many things, Mr. Burnett, but he was never a forger, and he was never a liar." The crowd turned to look at her. "Mrs. Whitfield." Burnett's smile was a rictus of false sympathy. "I understand your grief. Truly I do. But spreading these malicious accusations won't bring Thomas back. It will only destroy what little reputation you have left." "What reputation?" "The one you destroyed when you called my husband a drunk and a thief." Clara's voice rang through the church like a bell. "The one you're trying to destroy now by sending armed men to burn my home with my children inside." Gasps rippled through the congregation. "Armed men." A farmer named Henderson rose from his pew. "What armed men?" "7 of them. Last night. They came with torches to burn us out." Clara pointed at Burnett. "His men. On his orders." "Preposterous!" Burnett sputtered. "I sent no one." "Then where are they?" Sheriff Colton's voice cut through the chaos. He stood in the side doorway, his badge gleaming in the winter light streaming through the windows. 7 of your employees, Mr. Burnett. None of them showed up for work this morning. None of them came home last night." Burnett's face went gray. "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." Colton walked slowly toward the front of the church, each step deliberate and heavy. 7 men rode out to the Whitfield property last night with torches and rifles. They tried to burn a sick woman and 2 children alive in their beds. They failed. "And where are these men now?" Burnett demanded. "If what you're saying is true, where are they?" "Buried?" Eli said simply. Every eye in the church turned to him. He stood in the center aisle, his hand resting on his holster, his eyes locked on Burnett's face. "They attacked. We defended ourselves. 7 men tried to murder a family on Christmas night, and 7 men died for it. His voice was calm, matter of fact. I've killed men before, Mr. Burnett. In Texas, when I wore a badge. In Kansas, when I wore judge's robes. I've never enjoyed it. But I've never lost sleep over putting down rabid dogs either. Burnett's composure cracked. You're a murderer. A madman. Sheriff, arrest this man. Colton didn't move. On what charge? Murder. He just confessed to killing 7 men. 7 men who attacked a homestead in the middle of the night with intent to commit arson and murder. Colton's voice was ice. That's not murder, Mr. Burnett. That's self-defense. Any jury in the territory would agree. Then arrest him for trespassing, for interfering with legal proceedings. For what? Colton pulled a sheaf of papers from his coat. For uncovering evidence of fraud, bribery, and murder. For proving that you've been stealing land from homesteaders for over a decade. For documenting payments you made to the territorial governor in exchange for favorable rulings. The papers scattered across the floor as Colton threw them at Burnett's feet. I've been collecting evidence for 2 years, Silas. 2 years of watching you destroy people's lives and pretending I didn't see it. 2 years of hating myself for being too afraid to stop you. Burnett's face had gone from gray to white. Wade, you don't understand. I can explain. Explain what? Explain how Thomas Whitfield fell 20 feet onto rocks that somehow left wounds on the back of his head instead of the front. Explain how a man who never touched alcohol suddenly died drunk. Explain how the church you're building is held together with prayers and sawdust instead of proper timber. The congregation erupted. Women were crying. Men were shouting. Reverend Brooks, who'd been standing frozen by the pulpit, finally found his voice. Is this true? His face was ashen. The church my church is, it really unsafe. Agnes handed him the journal. Page 43. Thomas documented everything. The load-bearing beams are half the thickness they should be. The foundation mortar is mixed with too much sand. The roof supports are already showing signs of stress. Her voice broke. If we'd had a heavy snow this winter, if there'd been a full congregation. She couldn't finish. She didn't have to. The silence that fell was absolute. And in that silence, Silas Burnett made his final mistake. He ran. He shoved past the women in the aisle and bolted for the door, his expensive boots slipping on the wooden floor. Eli was after him in a heartbeat, Clara's voice calling his name as he sprinted into the cold morning air. Burnett had a horse tied outside. He was already swinging into the saddle when Eli burst through the doors. Stop! Burnett didn't stop. Eli drew his pistol and fired. The bullet caught Burnett's horse in the flank. The animal screamed and reared, throwing its rider into the snow. Burnett scrambled to his feet, his hand going for the derringer hidden in his coat. Eli's second shot took the gun from his hand. Don't. His voice was steady, his aim unwavering. Don't make me kill you in front of all these people. You're not worth the paperwork. Burnett froze. Behind Eli, the church had emptied. Dozens of people stood watching, their faces hard with the fury of the deceived and the betrayed. These were people who'd trusted Burnett. People who'd borrowed from his bank and shopped at his stores and prayed in his church. People who'd just learned exactly what their trust had bought them. It's over, Silas. Sheriff Colton stepped forward, handcuffs gleaming in his grip. You're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and the murder of Thomas Whitfield. You can't prove anything, Burnett snarled. My lawyers? Your lawyers can't help you now. A new voice cut through the crowd. Not where you're going. Eli turned to see a rider approaching at a gallop. The badge on the man's chest caught the light as he reined in his horse. Marshal Dawkins. The federal officer was older than Eli remembered, his hair gone gray at the temples, but his eyes were still sharp, his bearing still military straight. He dismounted and surveyed the scene with the practiced calm of a man who'd seen worse. Got your telegram, he said to Eli. Rode through the night. Looks like I missed the excitement. Most of it. Eli holstered his pistol. The evidence is inside. Everything you need to take down Burnett and everyone connected to him. Dawkins nodded slowly. Federal jurisdiction. Conspiracy crossing territorial lines. Bribery of federal officials. Mail fraud. Eli's voice was flat. Take your pick. I'll take all of them. Dawkins turned to Colton. Sheriff, I'm assuming federal custody of your prisoner. Any objections? Colton's face split into a grin. None whatsoever, Marshal. He's all yours. They dragged Burnett to his feet and clapped him in irons. The man who'd terrorized an entire territory for over a decade looked suddenly small and pathetic. His fine clothes soaked with snow, his face twisted with impotent rage. This isn't over, he spat at Eli. I have connections, friends in high places. You'll regret. I regret a lot of things. Eli interrupted quietly. But stopping you isn't one of them. Dawkins hauled Burnett toward his horse. I'll need statements from everyone involved. Official depositions. This is going to be a long process. However long it takes, Clara said, stepping up beside Eli. We'll be here. Dawkins studied her face for a moment, then nodded with something like respect. Mrs. Whitfield, I'm sorry about your husband. From what I've heard, he was a brave man. He was. Clara's voice didn't waver. And he didn't die for nothing. The crowd parted as Dawkins led Burnett away. The man's protests faded into the distance, swallowed by the vast silence of the winter morning. And then it was over. Clara sagged against Eli, her strength finally giving out. He caught her, held her, felt the tremors running through her body as the tension of the past days finally released. We did it, she whispered. We actually did it. You did it. Eli pressed his lips to her hair. You and Thomas. I just helped finish what he started. Don't. Clara pulled back to look at his face. Don't diminish what you did. You could have ridden away. Any sane man would have. But you stayed. You fought. You almost died for us. Almost doesn't count. It counts to me. Clara's hands cupped his face. It counts to Lily and Rosie. It counts to everyone in this town who's going to wake up tomorrow without Silas Burnett's boot on their necks. Eli's throat tightened. Clara. I love you. The words stopped his breath. I know it's too fast. I know we barely know each other. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is crazy. Clara's eyes were bright with tears. But I love you, Eli Mercer. I love the man who walked through fire to save a horse because he couldn't bear to let us lose one more thing. I love the man who faced down 7 killers because 2 little girls asked him to be their daddy. I love the man who ran toward trouble instead of away from it because he finally found something worth running toward. Eli couldn't speak. 3 years of grief. 3 years of running. 3 years of telling himself he'd never feel anything again. And now this woman was standing in front of him, offering him everything he'd lost and everything he'd been afraid to hope for. I don't deserve this, he managed. I don't deserve you or those girls or any of it. Maybe not. Clara smiled through her tears. But you've got us anyway. If you want us. If I want you. Eli's voice cracked. Clara, I've wanted nothing else since the moment your daughters grabbed my boot and asked me to stay. I was afraid. Afraid I'd fail you the way I failed Sarah and Hope. Afraid I'd get you killed trying to be something I'm not. You're not anything you're not. You're exactly what you are, a good man who's been through hell and came out the other side still fighting. Clara pressed her forehead to his. That's all I need. That's all we need. Mama. They turned to find Lily and Rosie standing behind them, their small faces uncertain but hopeful. Agnes Miller stood a few feet back, her expression soft with something that might have been satisfaction. Is it over? Lily asked. Did we win? Clara knelt and opened her arms. We won, baby. We won. The girls rushed into her embrace and Clara gathered them close, tears streaming down her face. Eli stood apart suddenly, unsure of his place in this moment that belonged to them. Then Rosie looked up. Her ancient eyes found his, and she reached out one small hand. "Come here," she said simply. "You're part of us now." Eli's legs nearly gave out. He knelt in the snow and let the girls pull him into their embrace. Lily's arms wrapped around his neck. Rosie's hand found his and squeezed with surprising strength. And Clara. Clara was there too, her arms encircling all of them, her tears wet against his cheek. "Daddy Eli," Lily whispered. "I knew you'd stay. I knew it." The word hit him like a thunderbolt. Daddy, not Mr. Mercer. Daddy. "I'm staying," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm not going anywhere. Ever. Promise." Eli looked at Rosie, at those knowing eyes that had seen him coming before he even knew he was lost. "I promise." Rosie smiled. "Good. Because I already drew the picture." She pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her coat pocket and pressed it into his hand. It was a drawing. Simple childish strokes in faded crayon. A house with smoke rising from the chimney. A fence with an open gate. 4 figures standing together holding hands. A man, a woman, 2 little girls. And written below in careful shaky letters, "Our family." Eli's vision blurred. "When did you draw this?" "The night before you came." Rosie's voice was matter-of-fact. "I saw you in my dream. You were riding through a storm and you were so sad. But then you found us, and you weren't sad anymore." Rosie. "Daddy Thomas told me to draw it. He said you'd need to see it. He said you'd need to know that everything was going to be okay." Eli looked at Clara. She was crying openly now, her hand pressed to her mouth. "I told you," she whispered. "She sees things." Eli pulled the little girl into a fierce embrace. "Thank you," he breathed into her hair. "Thank you for believing I would come." "I didn't believe," Rosie corrected gently. "I knew." The crowd around them had begun to disperse. People were heading home, their world changed irrevocably, their future suddenly uncertain but free. Agnes Miller touched Clara's shoulder as she passed. "You're welcome at the store any time, Clara. Anything you need." Clara caught her hand. "Thank you, Agnes. For everything." "Don't thank me. Thank that stubborn husband of yours who wouldn't let the truth die with him." Agnes's eyes glistened. Thomas was the bravest man this town ever produced, and now everyone knows it. She walked away, and the Whitfield family, because that's what they were now. Eli realized a family stood alone in the snow. "What do we do now?" Lily asked. Eli looked at the town around them. At the church that would have to be torn down and rebuilt properly. At the streets where people were finally beginning to talk openly about what they'd seen and suspected for years. At the future that suddenly seemed possible in a way it hadn't been since Christmas morning. "Now," he said slowly, "we go home." "The barn burned down," Rosie pointed out. "Then we rebuild it. That's a lot of work. Good thing I'm not planning on going anywhere." Eli stood and lifted Rosie onto his hip. "A wise man once told me that some things are worth building, worth protecting, worth dying for." "Who said that?" Lily asked. "Your daddy, in his journal." Eli met Clara's eyes. "He also said that love doesn't stop just because someone's gone. It just changes shape, gets bigger, big enough to hold new people." Clara's breath caught. "You read that?" "I read everything, every word he wrote." Eli reached out and took her hand. "He loved you, Clara, all 3 of you, and I think maybe he knew someone would come along to finish what he started, to take care of what he left behind." "You really believe that?" Eli looked at Rosie at her ancient eyes and knowing smile. "I believe that a little girl dreamed about a stranger in a storm. I believe that 2 children stood in a blizzard and prayed for a Christmas miracle. I believe that sometimes the universe sends us exactly what we need, even when we don't know we're looking for it." He squeezed Clara's hand. I believe in second chances. I believe in found families. And I believe that Thomas Whitfield is somewhere right now watching us and knowing that his girls are going to be okay." Clara's tears fell freely, but she was smiling. "Let's go home," she said. They walked toward Hope, who waited patiently by the hitching post. Eli lifted the girls onto the horse's back, then helped Clara mount behind them. He took the reins and began to lead them through the snow-covered streets past the church, past the general store, past the bank that would soon have a new owner, toward home. Toward the farm, where Thomas Whitfield had poured his dreams into every board and nail, where Clara had raised her daughters through grief and hardship and the constant threat of destruction, where two little girls had stood at a fence on Christmas morning and called out to a stranger. The snow crunched beneath his boots, and the winter sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. Behind them, Stillwater Creek was already beginning to change. Already beginning to become the town it should have been all along. And ahead of them, the future waited. A barn to rebuild. A farm to tend. A family to love. It wasn't the life Eli had planned. It wasn't the life he'd thought he deserved. But it was the life he'd been given. And this time, he wasn't going to run from it. 6 months later, the new barn stood proud against the summer sky. Eli had built it himself with help from neighbors who'd become friends from a community that had finally learned to stand together instead of apart. The wood was solid, properly sourced, every beam and board exactly what it claimed to be. No lies, no shortcuts, no compromises, just honest work for honest people. He was putting the finishing touches on the door when Lily came running from the house. "Daddy Eli, Mama says dinner's ready." Daddy Eli. Even after 6 months, the words made his heart swell. "Tell her I'm coming." Lily lingered, watching him work. "Daddy Eli." "Yeah." "Are you happy?" Eli set down his hammer and looked at her. This bright, fierce, impossible child who'd grabbed his boot on Christmas morning and refused to let go. "I'm happy," he said. "Happier than I've been in a very long time." "Good." Lily grinned. "Because Rosie says you're going to be even happier soon." "Oh, why's that?" "She won't tell me. She says it's a secret." Lily bounced on her toes. But she drew another picture, of 5 people this time. Eli's heart stopped. "5 people?" "Yep. She said I'm not supposed to tell you, but I'm really bad at secrets." Lily clapped her hand over her mouth, her eyes dancing with mischief. "Oops." She ran back toward the house, leaving Eli standing in the doorway of his new barn, his mind racing. 5 people, him, Clara, Lily, Rosie, and one more. He walked toward the cabin, their home where Clara stood on the porch watching him approach. She was beautiful in the summer light, her hair loose around her shoulders, her hand resting on her stomach in a gesture that suddenly made everything clear. "Lily told you, didn't she?" Eli stopped in front of her. 5 people. Clara's smile was radiant. "Rosie drew it last night, said it was important you knew." She took his hand and pressed it to her belly. "She says it's a boy. Says he's going to have your eyes and Thomas's smile." Eli couldn't breathe. A son. He was going to have a son. "Clara." "I know." She was crying now, but smiling through the tears. "I know it's soon. I know we haven't even been properly married yet. I know." He kissed her. He kissed her until neither of them could breathe, until the summer sun warmed their backs, and the sound of children's laughter drifted from inside the house. He kissed her because words weren't enough, because nothing he could say would express what he was feeling. When they finally broke apart, Clara was laughing. "I'll take that as a yes." "Yes to what?" "To everything. To building a life here. To being a family. To—" She paused. "To marrying me." Eli blinked. "Aren't I supposed to ask you that?" "You've been supposed to ask me for 3 months. I got tired of waiting." He laughed. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he laughed with pure, uncomplicated joy. "Clara Whitfield, will you marry me?" I thought you'd never ask. She kissed him again. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yes, to everything. From inside the house, Lily's voice rang out. Does this mean Daddy Eli is staying forever? Forever, Eli called back. Rosie appeared in the doorway, her sketchbook clutched to her chest, her ancient eyes filled with satisfaction. I know, she said simply. I drew that picture a long time ago. Eli looked at this strange, wonderful child who saw things others couldn't, who'd known he was coming before he'd known himself, who'd drawn their family into existence with crayons and faith and the stubborn belief that miracles happen to those who needed them most. Thank you, he said. Rosie smiled. You're welcome, Daddy. The word settled into his heart and stayed there. Daddy. He'd lost that name once. Lost it in blood and fire and 3 years of running from everything that mattered. And now 2 little girls had given it back to him. Not because he'd earned it, not because he'd deserved it, because they'd chosen him. Because love wasn't something you lost forever. It was something you found again in new places with new people if you were brave enough to stop running and start believing. Eli Mercer had ridden 1,000 miles to escape his past. And in a small homestead in Wyoming, surrounded by a family he'd never expected to find, he finally understood that he hadn't been running away. He'd been running home. The gate stood open. It always would. Some doors close forever, but others stay open waiting for the people who need them most, ready to welcome them in from the storm. Eli stepped through and never looked back. Home. Finally, after everything, he was home.